I have to confess that this piece was, I heard Sam Cooke's, who is the writer and the original song person for that song, and Jack Ross just does it so beautifully. I wanted you all to hear his rendition. But in July, around the 4th of July, I was sitting and I was thinking about so many things, the world, Sam Cooke's song. So as a spiritualist, I found myself deeply inspired by a few thoughts about the American Revolutionary War and about Sam Cooke's song, A Change is Gonna Come, and how that spark of infinite intelligence that resides in all of us and everything is godly, created, and not only loving, but can also serve as a beacon of light. A beacon of light that may be used to inspire others on their own personal path of progression during the darkest times we experience. As spiritualists or spiritual people, we know that progression is not only eternal, but we also know that it's personal. And while you are never alone, you are responsible for your own progression. The Oxford Dictionary defines progression as the progress of developing or moving gradually towards a more advanced state. As spiritualists, we also give credence to the belief that each individual is morally responsible for themselves and that we make our own happiness or unhappiness as we obey or disobey nature's physical or spiritual laws. Joseph Whitwell gave us his interpretation. He states that individuals are responsible for the welfare of the world in which they live, for its welfare, for its misery, for its happiness or unhappiness. And if we are to obtain heaven upon earth, we must make that heaven for ourselves and for others. Individuals are responsible for their own spiritual growth and welfare. Errors and wrongdoings must be outgrown and overcome. Virtue and love of good must take their place. Spiritual growth and advancement must be obtained by aspiration and personal striving. Individuals must bear their own burden in overcoming wrongdoings, place them with right action. The events and people forementioned and how they reacted to their earthly experience has inspired this talk. Let's take the American Revolutionary War. And while time constraints allow me to go into a deep explanation about the historical logistics marked by the US federal holiday known as Independence Day or the 4th of July, no one will disagree that the 13 colonies exhibited a feisty spirit for freedom in response to a series of directive demands in the form of taxation and action that the colonists viewed as an unfair process and also dictatorial in nature. So they pushed back by saying no in a variety of ways. Britain met the colonists' protests with brutality. With the help of so many, the colonists secured their independence from Great Britain after only slightly 7 years of warring. And while there were many underlying reasons why the British withdrew, simultaneously fighting other wars, no one could believe 13 colonies and their allies would exhibit such pushback and actually win their fight for independence. And in doing so, they became the first colony to rebel and obtain their independence. This bold act directly or indirectly inspired others to seek concessions or in demanding independence from their particular ruling sovereignty, For example, in 1793, the enslaved population of what is known as Haiti revolted against the French and established their independence as early as 1804. Ireland soon started to demand concessions from England, and a group of Irish revolutionaries formed the Society of the United Irishmen in 1791. In 1822, Brazil won independence from Portugal. 1808 to 1826, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Venezuela, Mexico, all won independence from Spain. The revolution also inspired creativity. After being kidnapped from West Africa and enslaved in Boston, Phyllis Wheatley's owner taught her how to read and write. She became the first African American and one of 3 of the first women to publish a book of poetry in the colonies in 1773. She is known historically as the poet of the American Revolutionary War. National Geographic has defined historical revolutionary as an organized movement aimed at affecting economic, technology, political, and social change. As I sit in silence, I am inspired to include a new definition called spiritual, or my personal favorite, spiritualist revolution. This definition would include a total shift, a change, and a destructive death of the limited and old perception of self. It happens when he, she, they, or them realizes who they truly are. The individual will remember and realize that they are limitless and bound by birthright. And then the push to align one's behavior and thought process to this new identity is a must. Because once you know that you are divine in nature, it is impossible to pretend that you don't know. I am immediately drawn to the law of truth. The law of truth is having the knowledge and understanding of right thinking, right acting, and right living. And how in order to comply with this law of truth, we must continue to have an open heart, evolve towards personal responsibility and personal growth. Neither history nor its people are perfect. None of us are. As historians, we are not shocked when one spouts off the biased rhetoric of a particular period. And with that being said, as spiritualists and as spiritual people, we are most fortunate that the road to progression and personal responsibility has been foundationally set before us by so many brave souls who first recognized, honored, and then embraced their own personal revolution despite their fears and personal concerns. Sam Cooke's song, done by Jack Ross, "A Change Is Gonna Come," is not only historical and currently astute, that song is visceral, haunting, revolutionary, and yet potentially so full of light and hope. As spiritualists and spiritual people, we know that we are spirits having a human experience. By no means is this an easy task. And for some, at any given time, this earthly existence can be. Sam Cooke's song, "A Change Is Going to Come," not only offers those things mentioned, but this song is also a creative example of how the particles of infinite intelligent God that lies with all of us lend support to our spiritual or spiritualist goals of progression. While the foundation for birth of that song, A Change Is Gonna Come, was the collective reality of brown and Black people throughout the United States during Jim Crow. Jim Crowism were a set of state and local laws that legitimized racial segregation, discrimination, exclusion for equal access to things like education, house, healthcare, and other opportunities throughout the United States for about 100 years after the Civil War, right up into the late 1960s. And while I know as a historian, there will be secret pact societies or policies that will replace Jim Crowism, more importantly, those who try to defy them often face arrest, fine, jail, sentence, and violence, and even death. This was the emotional, mental drawback to Sam Cooke's experience as he and his entourage traveled to working engagements. And yet there will be 3 defining moments in his life that will inspire that song. I call it Sam Cooke's revolution or progression. The first impetus to this progression was the summer of 1963. Sam Cooke's friend and business partner, J.W. Alexander, gave Cooke a copy of folk singer Bob Dylan's new album, The Free-Willing Bob Dylan. Sam was so deeply moved by Bob Dylan's song, Blowing in the Wind, a reflective song of protest that became a song for civil rights movement, but also for the current anti-war. Bob Dylan served as a beacon of light by offering Sam to feed his spirit by moving him into a deeper realm concerning his creativity and progression. And all Bob Dylan was doing was being his authentic self. Sam's friend Leslie Odom reported that Sam was so deeply inspired by Bob Dylan's song. Sam couldn't believe it. He was blown away that this young white kid did this profound piece about inequality. Also recalls that Sam was shaken to his core and became very reflective, saying, "Why didn't I write a song like that?" After all, Sam Cooke was intelligent, first Black artist to own his own recording studio, considered a musical genius, responsible for writing 150 songs, such as Chain Gang, Cupid, Wonderful World, Another Saturday Night, You Send Me. I don't know much about history to name a few. Sam's second invitation came to his progression in August during the 1960s in Washington. It will be there that Martin Luther King will deliver this I Have a Dream speech, where 250,000 people, all kinds of people came together in front of the Lincoln Memorial to highlight the inequalities faced by African Americans as a century after the Emancipation Proclamation. His third invite to progression, only 2 months later, will thrust Sam Cooke into yet another shift. That October, while traveling to reservations, him and his and band members were turned away from the Holiday Inn in Louisiana. He will be a changed man. His wife was with him when he was denied access to the hotel to please. And so she kept pleading with him, stop protesting. These people kill you. Sam and a few of the band members were arrested that night. And while he completed his gig, He will never be the same. In December of 1953, right after Christmas, Sam reported that a song, "A Change Is Gonna," came to him in a dream state. He recorded the song in January of '64. The musical arrangements involved 17 strings, very complex. Sam kept telling everyone it was the hardest song I ever have to do. After being stunned by the haunting beauty of the song, everyone understood why it posed such a formidable challenge to Sam. There was so much of him in that creativity. Bobby Womack, his friend, said that Sam said he was terrified because the sound of the song sounded like death. "I will only sing it live. I will never release it because it sounds so hauntingly like death." Was Sam Cooke's intuitive side foreshadowing his own physical death, which will only happen a year from the day of his dream? His partner didn't think so. His partner, Sam, was concerned about taking a career known. He had made as a crossover performer from gospel to soul. Do I really want to challenge that and lose my? It was obvious that Sam was at a progressive or spiritual revolutionary crossroad. He can hide his creativity born from the pain of this experience and ignore at the same time he was only sure of only 3 months ago, summer of 1963. As spiritualists, we on the other side. We also know that Satan has free will. This song was given to him in an alternate consciousness, a gift, if you will, and yet he still had free will to choose. On February 1964, he performed "A Change Is Gonna Come" on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Sam moved through his fears and did release an album called "Ain't That Good News." This song was quickly embraced as the anthem for the civil rights movement. And after Sam's death in 1987, he was inducted into the Hall of Songwriters Fame and the Rhythm and Blues Song Music Hall. He was honored with a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1994. The National Recording Registry of the Library of Congress selected "Change Is Gonna Come" for inclusion in 2000. Rolling Stones magazine voted "Change Is Gonna Come" the 12th best or important rock and roll song of all time. The American Revolution and Sam's creative piece, "A Change Is Gonna Come," were only two examples of how the human experience may utilize the challenges and sometimes brutal parts of the human experience to support in creating your own heaven on earth and unknowingly becoming beacons of lights for others to grow and create their own heaven on earth. It is so clear to me that those mentioned, stated in this talk, recognize their divine ability at some point, embrace their own personal revolution, and exhibit the responsibility for not only improving their own, but serving as models for their fellow humans. So I invite you to have your own spiritual revolution, birthing from your own earthly challenge. It doesn't matter what lights the shift inside of you. What part of this human experience can you to the threshold of your own progression or spiritual revolution? It is sometimes in the darkness of this life experience that we begin to remember and hear the whispers of how divine we truly are, and that the duality of the human experience can become the catalyst in creating your own heaven on earth. And while not necessary, you also become a beacon like Dylan did in becoming the lights for others just by being your authentic selves. Thank you.